say my name.
A thrice damned shampoo bottle. That's all it took to get this game controversy. Such is modern gaming. But if you ignore the annoying cretins, you will find that Ion Maiden Fury Storm is one of the great retro-styled first-person shooters, and the second best build engine game of all time. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Today, at long last, we are taking a look at the greatness that is Ion Fury Maiden Storm. Before we get to the game, let's take a look at that name. Originally, Ion Fury of the Imperator was called the much more catchy Ion Maiden, but Iron Maiden complained and lawyers ensued, and after some turnabout trouble, the name had to be changed. Ion Fury is harder to remember, especially if you are a fan of Deus Ex. It's hard not to mistakenly call it Ion Storm, and then everyone looks at you funny. Or that could just be how people look at me. But anyway, Ion Fury is a first-person shooter of the highest order. Health packs, all weapons carried at all times, and combat that is par excellence. A good first-person shooter is one where you have fun slotting the baddies, and a great first-person shooter is one where you get fully sucked into the game. It must have all the elements working at 100%. It must push the experience over 11, and it must make the player want to actually play the game at random times. For the review, I got quite excited to play the bloody thing as I was driving home from work. Few games elicit such a response from me. The combat is nothing short of superlative. The enemies are varied and quite fun to fight, and require a quick trigger finger to take down. They do a good amount of damage, so you're not wading through them like they're made of plasticine, and instead you must duck into cover and actually try and dodge their projectiles. My only issue with the basic foot soldiers is the fact they constantly say, "Move out!" over and over again. It does get grating, but other than this, they are quite fun foes. Next, the levels are quite excellent as well. They never get too convoluted, which was one of Shadow Warrior 1's problems, but they're not straight hallways either, and require a bit of intelligence to navigate. The level architecture looks nothing short of amazing. These levels are huge, and they look huge, and they are every bit as impressive as levels seen in more modern games. FPS literally lives and dies on its weapons, and the weapons in Ion Maiden are sadly only decent. The build engine games had a bit of a problem when it came to their weapons. Dukes were okay, but generally felt underwhelming. Shadow Warriors were better, especially with that nuke, but still none could hold a candle to the weapons in Blood. Those felt brutal and visceral, and the shotgun was the proper hammer of Talos. Ion Maidens are better than Dukes and Shadow Warriors, but still not nearly as brutal as the ones in Blood, and thus, while they're fun to use, I personally wanted them to have a little better sound effects, and I found the shotgun's design to be too modern, and thus it did not feel badass enough. I was happy to see the Chris Vector included in the game, and it is quite fun to use, but overall the weapons are good, but not super amazing. What is super amazing are the graphics. The build engine can look damn good indeed, and it can look damn good on a 32-inch 2K monitor. They're bright, they're vibrant, and there are numerous details to be found throughout the levels. The lighting is nothing short of amazing. That this is running on the build engine goes to show you that 3D Realms was playing with a great deal of techno-sorcery. The game features numerous in-jokes and callbacks to other 3D Realms elements. There is even a reference to the second Shadow Warrior book. Yes, there are Shadow Warrior books, and they are quite enjoyable indeed. And in Book 2, Lo Wang actually fights a mutant raptor that is trying to literally move the continents around the world, and there is a reference to that. 3D Realms. The music for the game is a treat for the ears. It's pure retro wave goodness. All of this combines to form a game that will keep you playing long since you should have headed off for bed. You might be tired the next morning, but you will not regret it. Ion Fury uses the eDuke 32 source port. I never had any crashes to desktop, and I was able to easily select 2K, and the game runs in 2K quite well. The controls are spot on, and the mouse does not lag like in some modern-day retro-styled games. The game is also a true classic in that you can thankfully quick-save. And oh yes, as you would expect from a build engine game, you'll need to be hitting that F5 key a whole bloody bunch. This game is not the hardest build engine game by far. In fact, it's probably the easiest, but that still means it's pretty bloody hard. This does make the game that much more satisfying, but later levels can turn into a bit of a slog and can give you gamer fatigue rather quickly. But that is the trade-off when it comes to higher difficulty games. The boss fights are quite fun, but you might need to replace that F5 key after you are done with them, as they like to have little helper spawn and health and ammo are limited in the boss arenas. In Ion Fury, you play as the Ion Maiden herself, Bombshell. In the past, she was meant to be Duke's sidekick. Bombshell in this game is sadly kind of generic. In media, the ladies are portrayed as being above juvenile humor for some reason, and thus they come off a bit stilted, and Bombshell comes off just as stilted as you would expect. She has a few lines here and there, but she doesn't emote enough to sell it. Contrast this to Bombshell in the Duke boss developed Alien Armageddon. In that game, she is just as vulgar and as juvenile as Duke himself, and is thus way more entertaining and true to what a Bombshell character should be. The story is also lacking in quality. This is one of those games that wants to be over the top and campy without really doing it. The story is quite generic, with great value Dr. Proton trying to take over the world. Shelley, of course, must stop him. Yay. The story feels too simple to be interesting, and there are no interesting bits of lore to pick up and theorize about, unlike in the original Duke Nukem. Going back to Alien Armageddon, the Duke Boss team did a great job in making the story come alive with minimal cutscenes and hints. Ion Fury could have done the same, but sadly it did not. Overall, the story is the weakest aspect of an otherwise superlative game. Ion Fury draws the player in with great gameplay and production values and keeps them there until the end of the game, but what it does not do is inspire the imagination. Old first-person shooters have endured so long because they gave you just enough story to leave you wondering and wanting more. Ion Fury lacks that hint of mystery, and thus I do not feel that it will endure as long as the other build engine games have. In the end, though, I cannot recommend it enough. And so, I am GeneralLotz, wishing you good amid evil, and good overload, or whatever makes you happy. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, and if you can, please consider supporting me on Patreon, so that I can continue bringing you this awesome content.